You know the Titanic. You've seen the movie. You know about the iceberg, the band playing the unsinkable ship that sank. But here's the truth the history books don't scream about. There are 3 ship disasters that were deadlier, more horrifying, and more unbelievable than the Titanic. And almost no one talks about them. Today, we're diving into each one. By the end, you'll never look at the ocean, or a river, the same way again. Let's start with the disaster that had sharks as the second enemy. July 30th, 1945. The USS Indianapolis, a Portland-class heavy cruiser, had just completed a top-secret mission. It delivered components of the atomic bomb Little Boy to the island of Tinian. That bomb would later be dropped on Hiroshima. The mission was a success, but the ship's worst journey was just beginning. At 12:14 a.m., a Japanese submarine, the I-58, fired 6 torpedoes. 2 hit, the first blew off the bow. The second struck amidships, near the fuel tanks. Within 12 minutes, the Indianapolis rolled over and sank. About 300 of the 1,196 crew went down with the ship. That left roughly 900 men floating in the open Pacific. No lifeboats, very little food or water. Most had no life vests, just their bell bottoms and a prayer. And here's the part that makes it worse than Titanic. The Navy didn't even know they were missing. The Indianapolis was on a secret mission, so no distress signal was sent. Or if it was ignored. For 4 days and 5 nights, those men drifted. Then came the sharks, oceanic whitetips, the most aggressive sharks on the planet. They began attacking the living, the dead, the wounded. Men screamed as shipmates were dragged under. Blood filled the water, which only attracted more sharks. Survivors later described the sound, a constant, sickening thrashing and tearing. By the time a Navy plane accidentally spotted them on August 2nd, only 316 men were still alive. 880 men died. That's more than the crew of the Titanic, and most of them didn't drown. They were eaten, or died of thirst, or went mad from the sun and salt water. The captain, Charles McVay, was court-martialed for hazarding his ship, even though the Navy had failed to send a warning about enemy subs in the area. He later took his own life. Decades later, he was exonerated. But the men of the Indianapolis, they were forgotten until the movie Jaws mentioned them in a famous monologue. That's disaster number 1. But number 2 didn't even happen in the ocean. It happened in a river in the middle of a major American city. July 24th, 1915, Chicago, Illinois. The SS Eastland was docked on the Chicago River, ready to take 2,500 employees of the Western Electric Company to a company picnic in Michigan City, Indiana. It was supposed to be a happy day. Families, children, picnic baskets. But within minutes of boarding, something went terribly wrong. The Eastland had a known problem. It was top-heavy. After new lifeboat requirements were added after the Titanic's sinking, the Eastland got even heavier. That morning, passengers crowded onto the upper decks to wave goodbye. The ship began to list, first slightly, then more and more. Crew members tried to stabilize it by flooding the ballast tanks on the opposite side. It only made things worse. At 7:28 a.m., without warning, the Eastland rolled completely onto its side. It happened in less than 2 minutes. The ship came to rest in only 20 feet of water, but that was enough. Hundreds of people, many of them women and children, were trapped inside the cabins, the dining rooms, the engine spaces. Water poured in through open portholes and doors. Panic was instant. Here's the nightmare of the Eastland. You could stand on the riverbank and see the disaster unfold. You could hear the screams. Bystanders pulled people out of the water. Some survivors climbed onto the exposed hull. But for those trapped below deck, there was no escape. The final death toll, 844 people. That's more than the number of passengers who died on the Titanic, and it happened in a river so shallow you could touch the bottom. Why don't we hear about the Eastland? Because it wasn't an unsinkable luxury liner. It wasn't on the open ocean, and it happened the same year as World War I, which swallowed the headlines. But for the families of Chicago, it was a wound that never healed. The ship was later raised and sold for scrap. Today, a small plaque marks the spot. That's it. 2 disasters down, but the third one is the deadliest peacetime ship sinking in history, and I'll bet you've never seen a movie about it. December 20th, 1987. The MV Doña Paz was a 2,000-ton passenger ferry. It was supposed to be a simple overnight trip from Leyte Island to the capital, Manila, but the ferry was grossly overloaded. The official capacity was about 1,500 passengers. That night, there were more than 4,000 on board, many of them not even listed on the manifest. Students, families, grandmothers, babies. At around 10:30 p.m. in the Tabla Strait, The Doña Paz collided with an oil tanker, the MT Vector. The tanker was carrying over 8,000 barrels of gasoline and other petroleum products. The collision sparked an instant inferno. Within minutes, both ships were engulfed in a fireball that lit up the night sky for miles. Passengers on the Doña Paz had no chance. There were not enough life vests. Most lifeboats were inaccessible or rotten. People jumped into the water only to find it on fire. The gasoline from the tanker had spread across the surface. Survivors described the screams as non-stop for hours. The fire burned so hot that many bodies were never recovered. Rescue ships arrived the next morning. What they found was a nightmare of floating debris and burned corpses. The official death toll is listed as 1,749, but investigators later concluded that the real number was between 4,000 and 4,500. Only 24 people survived. 24. That makes the Doña Paz the deadliest peacetime ship sinking in history, worse than the Titanic, the Lusitania, and the Eastland combined. Yet almost no one in the Western world has heard of it. Why? Because it happened in the Philippines, far from Hollywood. Because the ferry company was poorly regulated, and because the disaster was quickly blamed on human error, a tired crew, an overloaded ship, a tanker with expired licenses. There was no dramatic iceberg, no king of the world moment, just fire, darkness, and thousands of ordinary people trying to get home for Christmas. 3 disasters, each one in its own way worse than the Titanic, but none of them became a movie. None of them got a famous soundtrack, and that's why I wanted to tell you their stories. Let's put this in perspective. The Titanic sank with 1,517 deaths. The USS Indianapolis, 880. The Eastland, 844. The Doña Paz, at least 1,749 officially, but likely over 4,000. Combined, these 3 forgotten disasters killed more people than the Titanic, and yet they live in the shadows. Why? Because history doesn't just record facts. It records stories that capture our imagination. An iceberg is dramatic. Sharks are terrifying. But a top-heavy ship in a river, a ferry fire in the Philippines, those don't sell movie tickets. But now you know. And that matters, because every one of those victims was someone's mother, father, child, or friend. They deserve to be remembered not as footnotes, but as warnings. Warnings about safety, about oversight, about the human cost of cutting corners. Before we wrap up, if you made it this far, it means you actually care about the real stories history forgot. So here's my ask. Hit the like button. It tells YouTube that this kind of content deserves to be seen. And if you want more deep dives into forgotten disasters, submarines, and military history, go ahead and subscribe. It's free, and it makes sure you don't miss the next one. I'm building this channel for people like you, the ones who want more than the same old Titanic documentary. Which of these 3 disasters shocked you the most? The sharks, the river capsize, or the fireball that no one talks about? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.